Sanje Chodan Soji Chona La Chanju Pado Dani Jas Nagui Soji Chona Rola Benji Sanje Zuba Jo Sanje Chodan Soji Chona Chanju Pado Dani Jas Nagui Chijin Jive Chona Rola Benji Jeruwa Jo Sanje Chodan Soji Chona Chanju Pado Nagui Chijin Jive Chona Rola Duba Sho Ladana Metamanji on board the Jajuna Sojala Chava Chavana Sanja Sumbara to Shishi Dividu. Tedao Jay Temptation in the Jajun and the Jesuit, what is Java the Lacho Go. Developing just with him and their unbeaten level Tula to Sunyangi. Namala Gatalu Nijunga, Trubunda, American and Rawakunjan, which is a part of Jagadu, which do. Kangi Denjin Rawachon, Gavameva, Jimeva, Javameva, Tamego, Meva, Trumeva, Tate, Timmy, Tinchin, Jovanishi, Sidamba, Zoya, Sanya Manangi, Tamba de la Jaza, Lo, Soya, that Karsure. Tadakazure. Tanda di Jango Rumasengi, Tada Tishore. Pedu Juni Kutaba. Jango Rumbuchi Pedu Juni Kutaba Share. Pendu Judu. Pendu to the Jaga Pendu. Now the middle. Jaga Pendu. Sajandu Chunian, so I Jaga Pendu Judin La Taba Share. How was that? She Shugudella Kandayore, and I don't but Shugudella. She ne to Deni Tensheve, they should call out you to Chishin shares. She ne to Deni Shilikana, the number Sanja Churki, Drumro, the Kandashide, Sana, and she let them by me. She let them by me saying, she ne to Deni Tensheve, Sala, she, and the money to Tensheve. Shivala Dana, and the Karungore, Sana, they should call out Judo Chishin. Then by Shigila, I know Kwan Dobby on the Chevy to let you down. Kwan Jubilee on the Chevy to let you know what the money shave and the Tukorang to the Shegala, they should call out Judo Chishin. So, they should call on Judo, Jubilee down, Dobby Rimba Chishin Shevala Dana, and a cemetery, Japsum never yet. And you could just sing a della, cemetery, could just sing a cheat, Chu Kunjota. I know Sanya Kunjota. I know or Chu Kunjota, Kongan, Chutri, that's what Kundu Kunjo Singaji, Yabatella, and a cemetery, never you grace. What then you do about any Talam Gitawa Tuba, Talmusawa Tuba, change it look, Jenny. That turned out to do Jenna and did it.
Yes, can you hear me okay? Yeah. So what should we say today? There's a praise to the great masters and adepts of ancient India, in which it is composed by the Dalai Lama, Gyalwar Rinpoche, and in that it says that by taking the two realities as a basis, one can then understand in their entirety how it is that the Four Noble Truths operate in both the forward progression, in which the first two truths demonstrate the way in which samsara arises, and then the second pair of two noble truths explain how it is that samsara is averted and that one can achieve nirvana. So based on with the foundation of the two realities, ultimate and conventional reality or phenomenal reality, then one can understand the Four Noble Truths. Once one understands correctly the way the Four Noble Truths operate in those two pairs, showing the arising of samsara and its reversal or annihilation of samsara, then when one understands all of this correctly, then one develops firm confidence in the validity of the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, as providing refuge to all of the limitless sentient beings that suffer in samsara.
그래서 뭐야 대인상 다 토마데 가르레잖아 시대만 이게 내주지 시고와 인상 대송사가 아니 가르레잖아 싸워셔라 그냥가서 산재남지 최된 바 된바 이래야 라네 지금 군조 된바다 담비 튼지 된바고 간다 된바 튼이지 남이 남바 메셔바 뒤 산재 된바이 삼미 튼이 시민주로 사던다 된어리 와 산재 그 최대라 시내가라 아니 군조 된바다 군조지 된바다 된다베 된바 이와레스 간다 된바 튼이지 남이 남바 마셔베 시가라 군조지 된바다 된다베 대하기 남의 마셔봐 마셔봐라 아니 산재게 된바게 대관한이 시다 된바 시그 말에 그러와 대니남의 메시지 대다 산재 된바에 삼이 삼모 대관한이 시그 말에 있어 오송하다 대단 거래 대인상 다 된다면 된바니 있어야 돼 아니 시내가라 시라 된바니 있으니 된바니 시와서야 돼 아니 간대질에서 그래 세래가라 동바니 있어야 전화 된바시래 전화 된바서나 동바니 있으래 군도 된바서나 아니 타냐도 여봤자면서 근데지 아니 락시와다가 대이스잖아시 대이시와 같은 조시가 말해
So then with regard to the first of these points, that is that one needs to understand the two realities, the ultimate reality and phenomenal reality. That's the way I'm translating what is often translated as ultimate truth and conventional truth. So ultimate reality and phenomenal reality, those serve as the foundation. And this is illustrated in a verse from the basic text on wisdom by the Master Nagarjuna, in which he says that it's where he says that the teaching of the Buddha is founded upon these two realities, the teaching of phenomenal reality and ultimate reality. One who does not understand properly how to differentiate these two realities does not understand the profound truth or reality of the Buddha's teaching. So what's being referenced here is, in terms of ultimate reality, this is another name for emptiness, and it's so you have to understand emptiness in order to understand phenomenal reality as well. Phenomenal reality referring to the fact that things are only nominally existent or exist merely as they are designated and established through designation.
Oh yeah, demban이 남의 간대시 쉬고래 세래가라 니니기 남의 마시나 안에 다 가서래 고마주도 그래 좀 메셔봐 인상 아니 연반이 장제지 최지 조도 잠바 아니 대대송아 나시 전에 가소래 장제 양다바 여신도 양다바 지수 마동어 세송 나시 전에 이 도이 가서 장제 양다바 여신도 양다바 지수 마동어 세가 노티기 전다시 거래 이 전다시 가나 가르수고래 해서나 군족도 여발라 민다와다 tentam도 tentam바를 여봐라 민다와 tentam도 줘봐라 민다와 근저도 가자 탑 근저도 여봐라 민다와 근저도 여봐샤고 하다 tentam바 여봐 세가나 근저도 예장 아니 덴바를 매봐 덴바를 매봐라 민다와 인상 되게 간제세레세나 아니 최당 최강당 강인경 아니 탄예도 여발라 민다와장 랑경오 아니 텐다바 매바 텐다바 매바 예장 아니 탄예도 여발라 민다와 인상 랑경오 텐다바 예나 아니 탄예도 좀 못봐 그러와 텐다바 예나 탄예도 여바 좀 못봐 탄예도 여봐 줘디 아니야 텐담바 여봐 줘해 그러와 텐담바 여봐 줘 탄예도 여디 텐담바 여봐 줘 메고와 텐담바 메봐 줘나양 탄예도 메봐 줘 메고와 그러와 인자 군조도 여봐라 민대바당 라시 텐담바 메봐라 민다와 아니 양수리에다 다 같이 띠바래
같이 드너비 유블라 타니도 적슈 적 미투바
tentam바 군조도 여발람 다니 군조도 여발 좀 미투마 많이 받체 그라 tentam도 메발라 미다와 미다와 텐다 가서래 텐tam도 여발 다니 텐tam에 똥마 줘고 알아와 어디니지 되일래마다 군조도 여발라 미다바다 텐tam바 메발라 미다와 tentam바 메발라 미다와 군조도 여발라 미다와
So the way this is done is that the two realities are established in relationship to each other, such that both realities have to be properly delineated. They have to be distinguished from each other, but they can only be established correctly if one understands the relationship between them, such that they don't contradict one another. So when we say that something is not ultimately existent, that means that that does not negate the fact that something is phenomenally existent or conventionally existent. So conventional existence or phenomenal existence means that things are established as they appear through conventional means. That is, we have to be able to establish them through reasoning and understand the way they operate within the world. But when we do that and we establish something as being phenomenally existent or conventionally existent, we can't do that in such a way that it entails that things are ultimately existent, meaning that they would exist by means of their own intrinsic nature or have some kind of character which exists autonomously on its own. So, and then on the other hand, when we establish that things are not ultimately existent, that they are only phenomenally or conventionally existent, we have to do that in such a way that that establishment of their not being ultimately existent, that they're merely phenomenally existent, doesn't preclude our ability to be able to establish them as phenomenally existent, conventional things that function and operate in the world. So the differentiation of these two realities, two aspects of things, which pertain to everything that exists, all phenomena possess these two realities or have these two characters, such that the two realities exist relationally to each other without being able to do that properly. If we do it in a way such that when we establish that things are empty, we fall into the wrong view that things are completely non-existent. That's one mistake we have to avoid. Or on the other hand, if we establish that the causal relationships between things, how they function and exist in the world, if we do that and then we infer from their existence in that way that they are ultimately existent, that they have some kind of autonomous character or nature that would be able to withstand critical analysis, then that's another kind of mistake. So avoiding those two sorts of mistakes are absolutely essential to being able to differentiate correctly the two realities and establish the relationships between them properly, which again, as this verse was explaining and as Master Nagarjuna has elaborated or explained in the basic wisdom, that it's only through differentiating and establishing the two realities properly that one's able to then, based on that, understand the Four Noble Truths, which lays out the way in which samsara exists and how to escape from it.
Oh yeah, that 가소래 타녀도 여발라 민다와당 된다되면 발라 민다와냥 자디가 된다바 매장 타녀도 아니 가르소래 귤라데네 되우종 귤라데네 되우종하다 귤라데네 되우종아 저저디자마 아니 두 가소래 마리발레데네 아니 가소래 니와 두제기 레사바 레디 바자 남식이 된도 보니 아니 방대들이 좀 방대 중앙이 방대 중앙 방대 아니 남신의 제주지 남신의 미수 급하기 아니 다 관주비rin가 비 땡대디야 태봐 땡대 태봐 아니 어때나 밤에 비셔라 공발라 때네 아니 거기 자와 말이봐 아니 말이봐 가서 너배 아니 그런 말이 받대면 이원티 티꾸나라지 두제길래자 두제길래도 두제길래도 두제길래지 바자 남시 땡데지 남시 바자 과야 매바이자 판대대다 도야기 관도비를 받대야 아니다 라시지 매바라 차지태야겠다 주제태바 진정 차지태바 관도비 호와 주도 그런 받대 태바.
So then once one's established the two realities properly, that is, that things are phenomenally existent but not ultimately existent, so you've established the phenomenal nature of them, their phenomenal reality, as well as their ultimate reality, their absence of intrinsic existence or their emptiness. Those two, and you understand properly the relationship between those two realities, then you're in a position to be able to properly understand the way samsara operates, as it's explained in the first two truths, the truth of suffering and origin. And this is illustrated by the 12 factors of dependent origination, in which ignorance functions as the cause or the condition based upon which the activity of karma arises, and then that activity of karma impregnates the consciousness with an imprint which will then project or produce in the future some kind of suffering result. When you understand that the causal relationships between the different factors of dependent origination, you come to understand that these are operating relationally such that one thing depends upon another. They couldn't exist autonomously with some kind of independent intrinsic nature which would actually preclude them from being able to operate relationally, functioning together. So the two realities then enables one to understand how it is that dependent origination operates in the forward process of producing samsara, and then likewise it enables, in the same way we can understand it, that through the elimination of the cause, that is ignorance, one is able to, the primary cause, one eliminates the first factor of dependent origination, ignorance, and that then stops the arising of karmic activity, which serves as a basic condition for the experience of samsara. So in both the forward progression as well as the negative progression, by eliminating causes, you eliminate the effects. When the causes are present, the effects arise. One understands that all of these factors are related to each other in causal relationships. They occur relationally, and that relationality among the different factors of dependent origination is itself their conventional existence, their phenomenal existence, and when one understands that, then that in turn enables one to understand that they couldn't possess any kind of autonomy or essence, that they could not be ultimately existent and at the same time function in causal phenomenal relationships. So the understanding of the conventional existence of things actually reinforces then, or enables one to understand the ultimate nature of things, their emptiness or their ultimate reality. So the relationships are between the two truths and the four realities. The two realities and the four truths are established in that kind of process.
Oh yeah, 这一张他谈到希望那些前的这些科学都其实写个了，写点把你给那时候写完了，但呢，俺呢他呢都看就比人把当，看多比人把的太把人张，看就比俺呢人别往多钱外给，俺呢你就俺呢观众来打你没把当，俺呢这不懂啊。看多比人别往多钱越往多，俺呢就俺呢看的是来蓝电当，你这不过别点吧太吧，啊，真的比俺呢在电视台那样，俺呢看说的，东阿去点吧绝对干那样，俺呢他东阿去多把个人没大心，俺呢连年去先往前，东阿去点吧下来当。通过的连一个先往前去，通过的这个就连一牛天啊，俺就规矩的把小孩，这他看的人是呢，让自己马准备对在那带呢，大教过话，人家地区过话就多去些的，那都是用过人把的。
So then the line in the initial verse that we mentioned says that it's through correctly understanding then the four noble truths. That is, one has to understand how it is that samsara arises within the first noble truths. There's suffering, which is samsara as the sort of result of samsaric result. There's the origin of suffering, which is the causes that give rise to the suffering of samsara. Those two operate relationally, and when we understand how the 12 factors of dependent origination play out within those the first two noble truths of suffering and its origin, and then we likewise understand how it is that the 12 factors of dependent origination, when they're reversed, when the basic causes of samsara are removed, then the resultant suffering in all of its various forms is eliminated. Then that establishes the relationship between the two truths, the first two noble truths, and this all has to be done within the context of understanding that within the factors of dependent origination, the first factor of ignorance and karmic activity are merely conventionally existent. They're not ultimately existent or established by means of their own intrinsic nature. So it's through understanding that there's merely this conventional or conventional relationship, conventional existence of the factors, yet within that they're existing merely conventionally or phenomenally. We can establish, demonstrate, actually through reasoning and with actual demonstration, demonstrably, that the factors operate in the way that they do. That itself enables one to understand that they're devoid of ultimate existence, that they're not ultimately existent, they don't exist, they're not real, existing in the way they appear to ordinary beings, having some kind of autonomous character existing from their own side in that objective existence as they appear to ordinary people. So it's that absence of intrinsic existence is actually one can understand that through understanding the causal relationships and being able to properly demonstrate the causal relationships among the factors of the different truths of the Four Noble Truths. This applies to both the first two truths of suffering and origin, as well as to the the second two truths of cessation and path. They all operate together, have that kind of relationship in which their phenomenal or conventional existence necessarily entails their absence of ultimate existence, and thus illustrates the relationship between the two truths, phenomenal truth and ultimate truth, or phenomenal reality and ultimate reality.
Oh yeah, there that teach with the castle. This is called to says. The Bashi any or called Jubi Batang, Dobe and Bachi Chita was Shebe, and it's Hemetra, Jefferson, Gujos on a Hemetra, and one you grace. Now, Gujos on a Hemetra, and one you don't cut it, and it don't cut it, Dembashila, Quan Dobe and Batang, and it Quan Jubi and Bachi, when you are in Bala, Quan Doba Shebala. Kovago Judogo. Kovago, and it took an let animal. You won't get out Tawana, and it or you get it Tawane, can't you to Talachung? Tamari de Tele, Shadana Song, Zawa, and it doesn't marry Balatuba. Dancing Mario Bade, and a Seru Yimbade, and dancing Merin Bade, and a Dobam Seba Yovade, and a Dugre, and a Simji Rashila, Chimela Mashubata. Simji Rashila, Chimasleba Mashuba, Sunji Chumata Charudan. Oh, Chimalobu Yimbade. Ane tawa kata je chacha shi nangi chue zamja tongxing tang me ba se de shok gwa de yuden den ba de ra yin da jin mi da jin lian yu ji xiang wang jian yin ba zam da mi da jin lian yu ji xiang wang jian yin ba da ba yin na ane yu ka se le yu zhe me ba yu ge ge yu dang yu zhe gu de mi da ba yin ba yu zhe zhe ki yu zhe tian ane call Ram Meba, Lian Uncle George Bachi Yinzang, Midaji, Lian Xiawan Chen, said Tawakata Chachanane, Chutamja, Duchetamja Midaba, Sachatamja Dungawa, said Dusche. That didn't, or you are to do your day, Casore, Simjirashila, Chima Leba Masiba, the Chima Simjina Charu Yimbade, Ane, or Chutamja Donshin Dameba, said Chutamja Rashi Majuba Yinzang, Sema Rashi Majuba, Sema Rashi Mavela, Simji Rashila, Chima Leba Mashuba. Wa Simji Rashila, Chima Leba Yimba, and it Chimba Seru Yimba, Chima Tata Lubua Yimba. What to say much? Yeah. And it says so.
Okay.
What a connection, Montasa.
This one,
somebody can buy
somebody. Didn't she not in the
等于写吧，必须考完就多去写，必须考完就多去写完了才能，那才能准备接受人家话你个人是到底是吧
？So then that verse that we started off with says that through on the basis or based upon understanding the two realities, one can then understand the Four Noble Truths. Understanding the Four Noble Truths, then one can develop firm kind of ascertainment, confidence in the refuge that is able to provide refuge and rescue numberless beings from samsara. The way this operates then is that, as we said, through understanding the two realities, ultimate reality, phenomenal reality, one can then understand the Four Noble Truths. Understanding the Four Noble Truths, how does that engender the certainty that the refuge, that the three jewels are a refuge that can provide rescue from the sufferings of samsara. This comes down to a demonstration that the mind is such that it can be purified of the adventitious defilements that temporarily contaminate it or cloud the mind. So how does one establish that? First of all, the mind, we have to determine that the mind, that the suffering that we're experiencing, which is arising out of the adventitious defilements, the defilements that are temporarily appearing within the mind, are not actually of the very nature of the mind. They're not completely infused into the basic fabric of the mind. Rather, there's something that occurs within the mind due to temporary adventitious causes and conditions. So how do we then establish this fact? That comes about by, again, understanding the first two factors of the 12 factors of dependent origination, which, to review then, is that we have this basic ignorance, which is a misapprehension of ourselves, especially under misapprehension of our self as if it existed in a kind of autonomous, intrinsic fashion. That basic ignorance takes as its object the complex of the aggregates which make up the person, body and mind, and then it superimposes upon that object, the body-mind complex, a notion of self as if the self existed intrinsically, autonomously, as if it had some kind of intrinsic nature. We're able to demonstrate logically that that is not the case, that that basic ignorance is erroneous, and because that basic ignorance is the cause or condition which serves as a basis for the arising of the activity of karma, and when we understand how the activity of karma is what impregnates the mind with the causes that give rise to all of the suffering, it's basically the source. That basic ignorance is the source for the other forms of the adventitious defilements that contaminate the mind. Once we're able to understand that the adventitious defilements are not intrinsic to the mind, because the adventitious defilements, like the mind itself, do not exist by means of their own intrinsic nature. They don't possess some kind of autonomous, eternal character. A sort of gross aspect of this would be that if the adventitious defilements were permanent, they existed in a permanent fashion, they could not change in any way whatsoever. It would never be the case if they existed by means of their own essence that they could ever change. You would never have different mind states occurring where sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're sad. Rather, whatever adventitious defilement existed within the mind would have to be present at all times. If it would be permanent, if it was established by means of its own intrinsic nature. So through demonstrating that the mind itself is devoid of intrinsic existence, is absent, doesn't possess any kind of intrinsic character or nature, and that the defilements themselves are adventitious and likewise do not possess any kind of intrinsic nature, one can then, in that way, establish both the ultimate nature of the mind, its absence of intrinsic nature or essence, as well as the phenomenal character of the mind, which is its functionality, that mind, when conditions are present, gives rise to all of the different different kinds of experiences and phenomenal events that occur adventitiously within the mind, then understanding that, then we can prove and demonstrate that the mind is devoid of any kind of essence, and that in turn enables us to understand how all of the factors of dependent origination operate in both the forward sequence, giving rise to samsara, as well as the reversal of them, which is the elimination of samsara and the achievement of cessation of the adventitious defilements in particular.
Oh, yeah. tenda shida shuwa na shi chene chame chabe japsu ngewa ni se ane japsu mi se kande si ngewa chame jena kande se ta ju shuwa na shi chene ngaran zo zo tabo de ma ni den la pam de shi den la pa ba la den ane ko ji do ge ren ba qi xin du qian ne ane ko an do ba ge lam ji ren ba nyang su la ne 아니 양슬렘바 때네 아니 가소리 양슬렘바 체발라 아니 미디쇼 반자 미디쇼 좀 바시도 세거바당 아니 톱제 남지는 바른 바시도 공거와 인장 아니 예와 대다른 바시도 아니 예모 바제멜 타타모 사모동반이 때라파 동반이 때나 반에 돈이고 대당 치치 아니 다다시 군도 다 된다면 발에 민다와 세레 탑시 손제 양술렘니 탑시 손제 양술 람발라 때네 다른 바시도 진지를 받는 버르타제를 바시도 라렘네세 연연지리 탐제 받는 바시도 세네 타를 아니 가소레 라나면 바야다 바 조여 사제주 관반 토야지 아니 대접 타두라나면 바야다 바 조여 사제주 관반 토바 됐다 아니 저기 세바여 방에와 이들 사제 구조랑에와 참에 차병에와 녀바다 토제타도 집에 대제타도 여봐 아니 참에 차병에와 녀바다 개 톱시지 람탑시 순진이 탑시니 여봐 아니 참에 차병에와 녀바다 견더왜 람탑시 순진이 원바베 강사라야 여봐 아니 참에 차병에와 녀봐 도세 근데 차례가라 아니 참에 차병에와 이니 아니 랑게 람치다와 시도 관배 타를 교육세다 연대 군대지 저 사제주 관바 여봐다 도스투고야 말
So then, once one understands correctly the two realities, ultimate reality and phenomenal reality, and how they're illustrated within, or how they manifest within the Four Noble Truths, how they're exemplified within the Four Noble Truths, the rising of suffering from its origin, the cessation of suffering coming as a result of the practice of the path. That in itself, that understanding then is itself an understanding of the foundation of the Dharma, and once one has that understanding, one can then develop it further and further, such that one can come to understand how it is that through the purification of the mind by the removal of the adventitious defilements, and this first of all you have to understand that the defilements themselves are adventitious. They're not intrinsic to the mind, they're not of the very fabric of the mind, but they're something that is suitable to be removed. We're able to remove them from the mind. That understanding itself then serves as a basis for understanding how it is that through the practice of the path one can remove the defilements gradually. One has to start off with the coarser forms of the defilements, removing coarse forms of the mental afflictions, as well as coarse forms of karma, and then start off with that by eliminating first the gross aspects of misbehavior that it's found in karma, and then likewise the gross forms of mental affliction, extreme forms of anger and so forth. When you can eliminate those, then one can gradually get into subtler and subtler levels of the mental afflictions, these defilements that adventitiously contaminate the mind, and that when one understands that they're devoid of any kind of intrinsic nature, and thus they're suitable to be removed from the mind, then one can understand how it is that gradually you can purify the mind such that eventually culminating in the complete purification of the mind and expansion of it into the state of perfect Buddhahood. In order to do that, one must understand in turn how it is that the path works, particularly both the wisdom side of the path as well as the method side of the path. The two have to be understood individually, but particularly they have to be integrated together such that in order to achieve perfect Buddhahood, one necessarily has to employ a path that combines, yokes together both wisdom and method in a coordinated fashion such that they function cooperatively together, not separately. And that kind of path, then if one applies it gradually, one can eventually, going through the various sequence of the stages of the path, eventually arrive at the state of Buddhahood. So all of this going from the two realities, the understanding phenomenal reality and ultimate reality, and how samsara works, how it can be averted, how the path can be initiated and completed through the gradual process of purification of the mind and culminating in the achievement of perfect Buddhahood. When one understands this and has comprehended a rational demonstration of this, then you will achieve firm conviction that the Buddha is the valid, that the Dharma, first of all, which we've just gone over, is the valid teaching. That the Buddha is the valid, authoritative teacher of that Dharma, and that the Sangha is the authoritative, reliable helper in one's own practice of this path. And so all of this operates together so as to develop that kind of firm conviction in the Buddha Dharma Sangha as the refuge that rescues numberless sentient beings from the ocean of samsara.
Oh yeah, that didn't in the same time, but just on our knee is the Toma, she done by it down la pop. She done by it down la barber, down la pabecana, and or Tomba wants to Tony down la purr, and the Tomba wants to be she, Samuel Lamjir Batang. And a judge of Lamjir Ani or ni Shavicana, Lam Tapsi, you were there, and a tambo down la tamni, Rangula Majeva Channel, and a Tapsi Sunday Gombe, and a then la Pamni, Teda Tapsi, Tada Sherano with the Sunday Gombala, Dana, that and the Luruguswana, she chene, Gawati, you, Sonami, Sotoshi, Sonami, Lesume, Tabacuni, Taba, Shaw, Chene, Suana, she then one to Dana by the Gom. Tendrave, Annie Tendrave, Gombala Dana, Annie Sugudu Tiji, Annie Sononguso, Chanjugusana, Nijela Soa. Jisok, a Chugudu, any Shigo, and the Tony wants to be she. Or Tendavi is Shigo down, and it's one of so Sunday, toy, Gombala, Dana, Tar, Annie, or Casore. Tabacuni, say Gala, and so any son of Sola Sugutan. And it's always Sugut, and it's so Gombala Chumaga, and a good new to store it down. Or Gawati, you, Gusonami, Sotoshing, or Tashin with the Gombala Sonami, Chumi, and a Tabacuni Tabasho, say Gala, and the Chugutabata, Sugutabani, and a Juju Junior, and a Tabashi, that was younger, but.
So then this explanation of the way in which the Four Noble Truths illustrates the path, and then through the practice, understanding of this first, and then the practice of the path and in actualizing cessation, and then in turn how it is that the path that integrates, combines together wisdom and method in a coordinated fashion can gradually lead one to the achievement of perfect Buddhahood. That this is illustrated likewise in the verse from the Master Nagarjuna, Arya Nagarjuna, when he said that by these virtues may I be able to, I and all of the sentient beings accomplish, collect, and completely perfect all of the accumulation of merit as well as the accumulation of gnosis. And by virtue of having perfected and completed the accumulation of merit and gnosis, may I and all sentient beings be able to actualize the noble two bodies of embodiments of Buddhahood, the gnosis embodiment of Buddhahood, and as well as the physical embodiments of Buddhahood, the so-called form body and wisdom body of Buddhahood. And so this verse then is a summary of what we've discussed, in that it's based upon understanding the two realities, that things are devoid. Ultimate reality means that things are devoid of essence. They don't have any kind of autonomous character. Phenomenal reality means that things possess conventional functionality. They exist relationally and they operate together with each other. And those two realities then work as the basis for the Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths, when you understand them correctly and then augment them with the Mahayana understanding of them, such that one develops the method side of the path, which is starts off with the development of compassion and great compassion, and then you have to produce bodhicitta, the aspiration to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings based upon great compassion. Then one engages in the method side of the path, the practices of the bodhisattva, and one does this in conjunction with the wisdom that understands emptiness, the ultimate reality of things, that everything, including the path and what yourself, are empty of essence, yet all of these factors of the path function so as to produce eventually the actualization of the two embodiments of Buddhahood, the gnosis embodiment as well as the physical embodiments of Buddhahood.
Oh yeah, that tenderly, and it are sorry. Tangible command Tojiki, and it's Sami Lamjirimba, and it is. And can do so with the Tony Rimba, and it's our share. And it's our share of Tony Rimba, Deva Tiki, that's all. This is that Loma Shijawa Yambari, that tender with Shijawa, my Java.
So now then, the basic on the wisdom side of the path, there's the wisdom, meaning the understanding of emptiness. That's been elaborately explained by Master Nagarjuna in his verses on basic wisdom, and there he lays out in all of those chapters all of the reasoning which establishes emptiness, and both truths, both the ultimate reality of which is emptiness, as well as the phenomenal reality of things, how they exist and function together. Those two realities have been explained extensively in the basic wisdom. And then in addition to that, there's this work, the 400 verses of Master Aryadeva, which is an explanation of elaboration on points which are mentioned within the works of the Master Nagarjuna. And here in this course, we're going to just roughly look at some of the aspects of what's explained in the 400 verses of Master Aryadeva.
Oh yeah, that day, that day, Maganga Logan, Jacosaro, 10 March loss. That day, just a church to Mangachi Losha, go them. Karum or the Shidoka, Gasolation, or the Doguchum, she's on the second in a congestion, Rabda, Toyama, Tuansha, Chaza, Los Angeles, Sanja Sunda, Yava, Tavi, Major, but I was giving Sura, which you to students of Batana, Quinja Sajava, Gombolurusha, Chala, Kosonku, Tazaro, Tambala Chavata, Anita, Samilam Jirimba, Tejaki, Sindia Soja, and Lurula Chavachavat. 신이티나 마데 파로스 파다에 로데 쳔바제 강글로에 시비 건져봐 상비 투제 시비 그바사 자비에서 조유 멤버지 지지라마에서 지라더니 장군라마 총고바 예살에 서바쳐바체크 시다 시비 셔바 또가나 라니레셔 공바 패치다 간데살라 편바 체비실 디엔제 그 쳐바쳐바데 챤네 아니 셔바 담제와 간데살라 편바 체비실 땡주 집에 남셔요와 남셔요와 또 세다 디기 쳐바쳐바 좀
So this text, in terms of the explanation of Master Aryadeva's 400, is here in the commentary on that by the Master Gyaltsabje. It begins, the text of the explanation, a commentary begins with a offering of homage, of praise, and just to read that, it says, the homage here starts off by saying, I pay homage at the feet of the subduer, spiritual guide to transmigrators. This is on page 57 of the translation. Renowned on this earth is the omniscient one, who for the very white collection of virtue, like the face of a snow mountain, is as a wish-fulfilling gem, the source of everything desired. So this is a praise. Then the commentary here begins with the praise to Lord Buddha, the subduer or sage, who is known as the omniscient one. And then the next verse says, with respect I bow at the feet of the protector Nagarjuna, the only eye with which to see the Buddha's infinite teaching, who ascended to the state of omniscience, having fully elucidated the subduer's doctrines, such as the ultimate essence of the conqueror's teaching and so forth. So that's, again, a praise, an expression of homage to Master Nagarjuna, the protector Nagarjuna. And then the next verse says, I bow my head at the feet of the foremost father and son, who from early youth perfected learning, whose boundless knowledge and wisdom flourished, whose wisdom overcame the dangers of worldly existence, and whose beneficent compassion removed the dangers of peace, the radiance of whose renown dispels the obscuration of transmigrators. This is an homage to both Master Nagarjuna as well as to the Aryadeva, the author of the 400 itself.
Oh yeah. 라더니 텔라디 자주 선물이 나도 저봐 시제비 땡주지 틀리고 차와 디 퇴사 안에 찬지 장 흉고
Again. Okay. Through the thought of the great trail, the rest of it goes, you can read that. There's two more verses, or one more verse, is it? Okay, one more verse. Through the thought of the great trailblazers is hard to understand. I take pleasure in the exposition of this great treatise to increase my familiarity with the good explanation and also to benefit those who are fortunate. So that's an expression of the promise to compose the text and explaining the reason for which the text has been explained.
Oh yeah. That's how you tell it. 자두샤다가 샤다가르가 남아 벽가도 땡주 시자와 시비 슬레우차와 자두샤다가니 벽가도 시자와다 샤다니 땡주 거르가네 슬레우차와 남아니 시자와 땡주들의 레우 주주버리라 추수자와 시장아를 열라 치제레레 파제 전전 조바를 땡진 치제 시자 여바나 시자와 시자오 저위레밤도 샤다시와 땡주 자와시와 자와래 전에는 주가래 시티에 명을 맞춰야 돼 자와천이 찬다고 하래 대승거래 샤다시와 자와시 중앙에 저와 땡주 시자원들이 시자 명을 맞춰와다 아니 세지 로도는 세와 차비지리 아니 자와스 땡주 자와 세오 자와래 세가 시자와서 명을 봐 저바데 진바 취지 땡주소 시这对是咱明白在现明白在把人啦第个话你去了个到把给准备他也把塞往前边但是要话是现在就过来明到这把的是这样
So then the text is the introduction, where it says, this treatise of the 400 stanzas on the yogic deeds of bodhisattvas has 4 parts, the title, translator's homage, the text and the conclusion, and then it gives the title in Sanskrit, Chatushataka Shastra Karika Nama, and then Tibetan, and so forth. And Chatushataka in Sanskrit is translated as 400, Shastra is treatise, Karika is stanzas, Nama is the name. This treatise has 16 chapters of 25 stanzas each, and almost every stanza explains one complete point. Since it has 400 stanzas, it's called the 400. The original text is entitled Shataka Shastra, the treatise of hundreds. In Tibetan, it's called the Gyapa often, when it's quoted. The Chandrakirti's commentary says, regarding this treatise of 400, the word 4 is not explicit, and in order to dispel wrong ideas, it is called the hundreds. Because it corrects misconceptions, it is called a treatise. The reason why the word 4 has been omitted is because it dispels countless hundreds of wrong ideas. Hundred is a word for many, many. It is therefore entitled the Treatise of Hundreds in view of its functioning, how it operates. Chandrakirti has explained the wrong interpretations that have been given by other commentators based on the appearance of the word hundred in the title. The short title is often hundreds. Chandrakirti authored the commentary by understanding the intention, which is actually implicit in the text, has clarified the meaning of this version of the title to preclude other wrong ideas.
Oh yeah, 다 규자대 바바 잠바샤 라바샤를 때좀 뭐지 대나 바지지 좋은 비더니 시어체 다 숨바 슝기团라 지团당 소수团 담보지된라 단지 잡아비 쳐와这些先进劳动사와 내위 초뒤에 담바체 라 다 담보 잡아비 쳐와니 한글 로변 바바라더니 루루지 로마라 나와 루루 로마라 나와 대주바 대진디 대기 루라 루셴 미 c'est à 루루구 루레 루셴 마인바 디다 파바라니 싱글링도 준비 자위 사시데 다 돈도 주고돼 탈자자도 바랍도 신로조진다 로조조지 아니 뒤다서 로벨루루지 년에서 동아지 담바 제와 투지전 년에서 라베 꾸제테니라 산제유 콤바니와 시레스 대인바데 가르에서 로벤 디니지 마기 아니 지디수 나절라미지 토몽마이 비리도 바샤지 셰바 코란랑기 아니 같이 나라 지디 점에 가서 아니 줄이 도바 샤치 시신 줄이 테테라 도베 가사 있나 테테라 사제 콤바토베 차와요 아래 기자 테토베 테테라 초공으로 내가 도바 공부르지 셔봐요 와 백하지라 기름 먼저 손에 저름 톱지 중앙 아마 레바 테테라 줄테라 테테라 손주 콤바니아 바데 다담 타바데레 대나 구제딜라 소제 구제들라 소제 샤바 가요 말에서 구제들라 소제 이장 세면라 아니 구제면라 손주냐와요와 어디스 순걸 가와 매지 이시도 군디 제바 로벤데 사제바 토바샤도 야
So then next is an explanation of the translator's homage. It says homage to the exalted Manjushri. This shows that it's a treatise on Abhidharma, on metaphysics. Here it says treatise of knowledge, but that indicates Abhidharma. And the main topic here is the training in special wisdom by showing the object, which is of the special wisdom, understanding emptiness correctly. Then that's the main topic. And then there's other subdivisions of the outline here, which demonstrates the author's greatness, eliminates wrong views, which some other commentators have explained. Here it says that Master Chandrakirti has said that Aryadeva is accepted as the translation here says accepted as the Master Nagarjuna's main disciple, but I think that actually means that Master Nagarjuna actually authorized him or or called him, designated him as his main disciple. His system, that is Aryadeva's system, does not differ in any way from the way in which reality is explained in Master Nagarjuna's system. The two systems are identical in regard especially to the exposition of emptiness or ultimate reality. Master Aryadeva was born as a prince in Sinhala. Then he gave up his royal inheritance and took ordination. Then traveling through South India, became Master Nagarjuna's disciple. Having gained a profound understanding of the teaching of Sutra and Tantra, Master Aryadeva practiced their meaning and thereby definitely reached the state of Buddhahood in that very life. Here there's a discussion of whether or not Master Aryadeva, or the text indicate that Master Aryadeva actually achieved Buddhahood in that life. But in the Compendium of Deeds, which Master Aryadeva himself wrote, he himself states that he attained the illusory body, and thus, having achieved that form of the illusory body, it necessarily entails that one will achieve Buddhahood in that very life, therefore, in that very life. So, therefore, Master Aryadeva necessarily must have achieved Buddhahood in that life. There are other, some readings in some texts say that read differently, but this is the way we've explained it just now is the way it's explained, as a way it's accepted by this tradition. Thus, there's no contradiction when it's said that he was said to be an ordinary person during the early portion of his life. There's a commentary on the, here it's translated as Compendium of Vajra Wisdom, but it's Compendium of Gnosis, Jnana Vajra Samuchaya, which states that this master attained the 8th Bodhisattva ground, and there's no contradiction among these accounts of Master Aryadeva, because it's generally accepted that he started off as at the level of an ordinary person, but achieved Buddhahood in that very life by actualizing the illusory body, and therefore this is the account that is followed here. There are lots of other texts that Master Aryadeva composed on Sutra and Tantra, which are not elaborated upon here.
Oh yeah, that's Younger can number news is a jumbo chongi, and it Jawa Shibaki, and it's like Danju Della, and a Raja Lini Shani, Raja Tambo Jella, and Chetan by Javatan. Raja Chimangela, Java Jawa Shivatan. And the Tanka Temperes and a Samsung with the Nashi Chani. Nimbi to Kundarangani to a Goba, not able to the Java Zeto, so tender what they to the Gomba Mares. Javala Kanshi Shulu, Tani Soso Chana, Macheva, Kenny Shulu, Sosama should Pajo Yin, Samsung to the Java de Madibasore, she soon be. Then you can't tuba Chimbi, Lame Chanju to Jebe, Lamjiraba, also to our chick, Deja to Tamba Yins, Deja to Tambares, Tabaramato, should them be Javatan, Chimajala, Taba Javasa, Tendiki, Chabashana, Tangamares. Nimbi Tayang said, Nimbi Tayang, and a tangent Java Chuma, Rashi Chua, Josa Tayang, Meba Sawa Tambalas, then the Tomba, the Tomba Tanjung to Sawa Tambale, and a Samsabe Debak, Shawan, Ranula, Kelly, and be Topina, your Maris, or this one.
So here there's an elimination of a wrong view, which some other commentator has posited. On the commentary itself, that is Master Chandrakirti's commentary, it says, regarding this, nowadays there's actually it means poet, someone who is a poet, who has divided the text into two parts. And this is the reference to the master Dharmapala, who has taken the word hundred, the word hundred in the title, has divided the text, the body of the text, into two parts, and says that the first 8 chapters are an exposition of the Dharma practices and the hundreds that pertain to that, and the second 8 chapters, second set of 8 chapters, are the hundreds that explain disputation. And then likewise with respect to the essential meaning of the text, Master Dharmapala interprets it as in a way which is composed a commentary which follows the Vijnanavada or the Yogacara system, in which it's merely rejecting the idea that imaginary phenomena are established by means of their own intrinsic identity. This is not acceptable as the meaning of the root text, that is the 400 itself, and the commentary, Master Chandrakirti's commentary, explains why. He says that someone who is differentiated it in this way, divided it up into two parts and come up with these different definitions of things, is just engaging in sort of separating things up, talking about them in a different way, and is actually kind of engaging in mindless or babble, chatter. And the reason how that is demonstrated is that the person for whom this text is designed, the 400 is designed, is someone who belongs to the lineage of the Mahayana, and who is following the entirety of the stages of the path that lead one to unexcelled awakening, of Buddhahood. And the text itself teaches all of these stages of the path to unexcelled awakening in a completely integrated fashion. So therefore, it's inappropriate to divide the text into two parts and to say that one is teaching the Dharma and the other is dealing with disputations. That's completely incorrect, just in terms of the way the text is formatted. And then in terms of the essential meaning of the text as well, it teaches dependent origination in a way, establishes dependent origination in a way in which it's clearly established without even the least bit of things being established by means of their own intrinsic nature. And that being the case, if you are someone who is entertaining the idea that dependent phenomena are established as real, as is done in the Yogacara system of Buddhist philosophy, then you've completely misunderstood the meaning of Aryadeva's basic text, and there's no foundation for that kind of misapprehension of the text as teaching that dependent phenomena are established, are real. And then,
아니 루라 세발을 터와라 담에 또 먹고 와 땡진디 고와 싸워 주비시 되라 땡진디 개고와 싸워 주비시 타와 터봐라 아니 동반이 또 싸워 주바 인자 공도 미대버치 다수만 내위 촌도 뒤 담바니 땡진디 잠발라 고와 메데 아니 우마자라 샤르 그 가서 아니 사미름 남예름 밖에와 땡라 파비치잖아 줘요 말레스 루벤지 땡제 나서 라샤지 대와다그 대바 리비 소투면 가바 잡아나 우미 땡제니 고와 셴 시기는 비치도 채와니 잡아 술레비 땡제스 토바나스 타바 치베 되는마 잡아 술레비 땡제 토바나 잡아 셰라서니 잡아 술레비기 아니 치도 잡아 말레스 타바 텐도니위 녀와나지 오비 태코나니 또비 텐도 아니 잡아 셰라 잡아리나 개양 티바치 비르젠남 나주지 잡아 냥수 lembi lamji rimba di sanje tobar chebe lojun ji o same lamji rimba de sanje tobar cheba de lobenji sheba tobi cheto loben ludu sheba tobi cheto ani daji chipo uma shijawa de sabare kiba membe khasa namji chaju tobaya obi teokana ni tobala ra lebate ani shala tambare.
So then another point on that same misunderstanding of the way the text is formatted, divided it, the way it's in the subject matter of it, is that in this system, that is the systems of those who misunderstand, misapprehend the 400, the Yogacara interpretation posited by Master Dharmapala, in that one doesn't need to understand the subtle form of selflessness in order to achieve achieve liberation from samsaric existence. That's their position. And in this treatise here, that is the 400, it's clear, it's established clearly that one necessarily has to understand subtle selflessness in order to achieve liberation. Then the third topic is a brief explanation of the subject matter of the text. And here someone might entertain the idea that, well, what's the point of this text being composed, this treatise, that is the 400 being composed? There's no purpose of it, because Master Nagarjuna has already extensively explained all of this in the basic text on wisdom, the Sawashirap. And however, that misunderstanding is not the case. That fault doesn't apply to Master Aryadeva's text. In Master Nagarjuna's works, he has explained in many different ways, employing a whole mass of reasonings, the rejection of the wrong views that are held by both non-Buddhists and Buddhists. When he's done that, in the basic text of wisdom, he did this not simply in order to overcome others in argumentation and debate, but he rather did this. He didn't compose that treatise, the basic treatise on wisdom, just to engage in idle argumentation, but rather all of the works of Master Nagarjuna, the basic wisdom and the rest of them, are not for the sake of argumentation, but for the sake of liberation. And for those who are striving for liberation, one necessarily has to understand reality, the reality of things as it is, and all of those texts were composed for that purpose. Then likewise, with respect to those who are who belong to the Mahayana lineage, who have that inclination to practice the Mahayana, this text here, the Master Aryadeva, lays out all of the stages of the path for practicing the conduct of a yogi or yogini, the practices of yoga, so as to enable one to achieve Buddhahood. And in order to understand the way those are taught and to be held within the treatises of the Master Nagarjuna, then this particular treatise of Master Aryadeva, the 400, has been composed. And then even with respect to those who are following the lesser vehicle, so-called Hinayana, in order to achieve that kind of Buddhahood, they necessarily have to understand the reality of things, and that's explained likewise in the 400 as a side topic. It will be explained along the way.
Oh yeah. Then when I come to any castle, 타주시부 공방 토바라 아니 잘못동반이 또 거데 레진 층와라 소 땜바라 와스 단지 지된데 라메 창주 토되나 제자와 창주세 랑자고 다대다 최대对比 인제다 니메다 이시라 세기 레진 층의 치태기 아니 라나면 창주지 산제 공방 토바라 아니 잘못동반이 토바 창주 토바스 샤르 와라 레진 층와 저를 댄스 바 민남시나 레진 층와 땜바레도 끼와 말레스 가르레서는 티바침비 섬제 깨와라 나 다다 니류 탐보 라땡게 장대 다다도 준비 아니 메자와라 자와다 동아라 대와다 미다바라 따바다 다도 마도와라 다도 준비 아니 단자도 준비 치지로시 봉와就是出任个三八交往案的这个出现，就前面老人一来接完了，等到三八交往案的做过话给，当在大道是代表过呢，出任个三八交往案的做话给出切少完了，安尼到第二就他们考虑担保的，是吧？担保长，我们陆节咱们第二级拿下担保了，担保你拿下担保了，现金劳动过把给，安尼劳动被卡说劳动过把给收收起吧。 rwa lodo goba bebe surchimba yawara zabe ani de jyo mari.
So then, likewise, someone might think that, well, this subject matter, that is the way in which one progresses along the stages of the path to Buddhahood, that's already been taught by Master Nagarjuna in his treatises such as the Precious Garland. In the Precious Garland, there's a verse that says that one must have compassion and bodhicitta, which is as firm as the king of mountains, Mount Meru. And the Precious Garland explains extensively the Mahayana path of developing compassion, how to developing bodhicitta, and how to achieve Buddhahood in that way. So what's the point of this text here, the 400 verses of Master Aryadeva having been presented? The answer to that is that that misapprehension that someone might entertain does not apply, because once one is in order to give rise to the bodhicitta, the mind of which is desiring to achieve Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings within the Mahayana, one first of all has to proceed along the path of purifying one's mind of the misconceptions that things are pure, or that contaminated things are pure, that things which are actually of the nature of suffering are pleasurable, that things which are impermanent are permanent, that things which are devoid of a self possess a self. Those four forms of misapprehension of things as being pure, pleasurable, permanent, having a self, those four erroneous ways of apprehending things have to be eliminated, even if one is just training oneself within the stages of the path of a person of lesser or intermediate scope. So these have to be trained in for someone who is developing the Mahayana path of bodhicitta, and then all of the bodhisattva conduct and so forth. So these are extremely clearly and in detail, elaborately taught here in this 400 verses of Master Nagarjuna in an extensive fashion. And then likewise, when Master Nagarjuna has presented the layout of the two realities, in places he's presented refutations of others' wrong views in an abbreviated fashion, but here in the 400 verses of Master Aryadeva, those points are elaborated on or expanded upon and taught extensively, and therefore there's no fault of redundancy with this treatise of the 400 verses being something which has already been entirely taught in exactly the same way with all of the elaboration in the Master Nagarjuna's works.
Oh yeah. 요즘에 아니 시대가 고다 최저 맞아봐. 최저 맞아봐야 아니 가서 레벨로 그슈나 도바집이 최저점도 12치도 아니 고다에 최저 맞아봐 디레.
And this is also clear because in the root text there's no verse of homage at the beginning of it. It goes right into the root text without an homage at the beginning, and that's clear that Master Aryadeva did not did not put a verse of homage at the beginning of the text, because he considered that he was composing this simply as an adjunct to eliminate various wrong views that could arise with respect to the system of Master Nagarjuna, and so that's another piece of evidence to show the context of this text and why it was composed.
Oh yeah, that didn't that then you did. I was just 가르를 살았잖아. 교사 간단 강 남지는 받치다 된다는데 간데스레 사나다 돌테니 셰 돌테니 소야다 되니서레 된지 남지는 받치다 된시나세 나 저바데 다 잡아 시절 저바 인지레 가나 지된 거 보시다 내와시 남바체네 림지 탄담 된주바세 아니 가네 지된 용어 보시다 느지 지다 치다 내와시도 남바체네 림지 아니 대다 탄담 된주바데 탄담 바라시면 봐 된주바 시셰베 라제 탐보 시보 티리 사바다 제유 퐁퐁是吧？大把说是真吧，这他广东媳妇个长得大就真吧，七级老多蛋呢，蛋吧了蛋呢，俺那考完了一种出结完蛋吧，考完了一种接触接的，俺那艺术接触结完蛋吧的。有点吧的，天上看着的是，而且汤不给，俺那碰碰有点见了，然后来呗，大长的大这样一张，大把给，看出来结呗，没大把赢了。天上七万没到工作，结完代表光呢，当真七级路帮过我，当真7级路帮过我单了。这是他不给是吧？而且你别看没大把钱呢，让的他都比一点，但是没大把一点没吧，一点没那是没用的。啥把他教育碰破天，俺你他让他东安军也跟那边打你赢呗，啥家军我你赢呗，俺那到了这边7级路都送出单。다 돌아보지도 샤우도 했지 제가 잡아를 정거로 와 제가 정거로 와 여러분들 샤다요
So then if you say how does this treatise teach the stages of the path, there's a verse that's embedded in Chandrakirti's commentary which says that it's by teaching first how it is that worldly things actually exist, then having laid that out, then gradually one teaches the ultimate here referring to essencelessness. And so explaining that, the first 4 chapters or expositions of the 400 explain how it is that the five aggregates which are contaminated are how we misapprehend them. We erroneously apprehend the aggregates which are actually contaminated as if they were permanent, as if they were pure, as if they were the source of happiness, as if they had some kind of self within them. And by teaching that, then it shows, it extensively explains how it is that one can develop renunciation. Renunciation being common to both the persons following the path of the lesser vehicle as well as Mahayana path. And so the first chapter then explains how it is that the 5 aggregates, because they depend upon causes and conditions for their arising, are necessarily impermanent, and something that's impermanent in that way is not something that is suitable to rely upon for happiness. And then by meditating, teaching extensively how one is to meditate on the impermanence of death, then one is able to, it shows that one necessarily has to get rid of the wrong view which apprehends things, the aggregates in particular, as being permanent. Second chapter then shows that that which is impermanent is not suitable to serve as a foundation for something that one should have ultimate confidence in, for one's own purposes alone even. And then likewise that these contaminated aggregates are things that have as their very character harm to oneself. And this in turn then shows how it is that one is able to eliminate that kind of misapprehension. So this is just a brief introduction to the subject matter of the chapters. These will all of these points will be elaborated on in detail as we go through the specific chapters.
是吧？那你们落马个钱了啊？这是吧？而且说白了，啥钱多少啊？这多少钱吧？他对钱他们家没打吧？啥钱他们家多少啊？他都什么上个的？那的大陆这就可能马天用个吧？他这落过什么的？他你话。数岁团下巴天马钱钱了，这就说在那地儿吧？因为数岁团下巴天了，古都电把了电别咱们人把下巴当。团团电把了电别咱们人把下巴印钱，是吧？ 아니 다보고도 담발라 때문에 남지는 바샤발라 다 치질록시 빵바 땜비고는 주증게 삼바장데 안에 면섬 계수 좋아 주증다 도모라라 람네 대주서 멤버 자주 섬 계수당 주섬께네 저발라로서 샤바 이세 좋아 당보되라 아니 가서를 치질로 빠벽고는 주증게 삼바장면서 잡아대라 아니 10월节전 예월 산벽권은 당지 치질로 본투 샤바당 사제주리 동아와 공벽권은 더러 집이 치질로 그 본에 타 샤바 다 단대다다 신보들이 마시는 코아미자베를 하시도 산벽권에 장와 집이 치질로 본에 타 샤바 사제중호는 다단 다기와서는 수민유바를 다기와를 수민유바 땜벽권에 당지 치질로 본투 샤바 전에 시대체 是吧？他谈不得了，今天结了300光呢，七九了帮助下班了，你是他们7月结束，全部结了300光了，当时7九了帮我下班的了，你是6月熊下班的6月3日对吧？谈不了什么7月结束这边，他们准备朋友过啊，多点吧他，没到我工作结完下班，没到我工作朋友钱，他都是来下。
So then we're not going to go over all of the rest of the explanation of the chapters here. That you can read. It's clear in the translation and in the text itself. And so going down then to the initial subdivision of the first chapter. The first chapter, which is dealing with the how the 5 aggregates, because they arise depending on causes and conditions, they're impermanent. So this goes down to the subdivision, which is the explanation of the particular parts of the text, which comes after the discussion of the 16 chapters. It says that the second subdivision of the overall text here is the explanation of the particular meaning of the different chapters. The first, this is here it says that in dependence upon an explanation of the stages of the path in dependence upon phenomenal reality. Second, explanation of the stages of the path from in dependence upon ultimate reality. First of these is subdivided into 2 parts by showing the way in which one can eliminate the 4 forms of erroneous apprehension of things. One can train oneself then in the thought of the person of intermediate and of lesser and intermediate scope, and particularly develop the attitude of the person of intermediate scope. And then having developed that attitude of the person of intermediate scope, renunciation of samsara, one can give rise to the aspirational form of bodhicitta. Then the second topic here is once one is given, one done that, then one can produce the active form of bodhicitta, and having done that, then it explains how one trains oneself in the practices that follow upon developing active bodhicitta. First subdivision of that is that, again, is subdivided into 4 categories. By thinking extensively on the recollection or mindfulness of death, one can it shows the way in which one can get rid of the erroneous idea that oneself and other things that are not permanent are permanent. Then the second topic is showing that by means of meditating upon the suffering of the contaminated body, that's the method by which one gets rid of the erroneous misapprehension of the body and the contaminated body as being a source of pleasure, of happiness. Then third is that by showing that samsara has as its very nature impurity, it's a kind of filthy or impure nature. It explains the method by which one eliminates the wrong view that misapprehends things that are impure as if they're pure. Then finally, fourth subdivision there is that that one is unable by showing that one is unable to hold things which are contaminated phenomena or contaminated things as being a self or possessing a self, being the possessions of a self, then that explains how it is that one can eliminate the misapprehension of the self. So back to the beginning of that list of subdivisions, the first topic here is by thinking extensively upon meditating on and developing a mindfulness or recollection of one's death, that one is able to get rid of the wrong view that holds oneself as being permanent. That first subject, which is embedded in the first verse of the first chapter, is there's an explanation of the chapter title. Explanation of the explanation of the subject of the chapter, explanation of the title of the chapter. The subject of the chapter is explained in three subdivisions: meditating by recollecting death, how one there's a brief exhortation to develop conscientiousness, which causes one to make effort in the path to liberation. Then there's an extensive explanation on the way in which one meditates upon impermanence, the benefits of meditating upon impermanence, and then that leads into the actual first verse here. We'll stop there for now.
Sanje Shindu Mitepo Aye Troke Namda Shenla Cheba Yoyi Tangu Rana Mendala Kane Atayami